The original Aberlour distillery was founded by the Laird James Gordon and was run by James and John Grant and the Walker brothers. But by the end of their lease in 1840, the Grants had started up the famous Glen Grant distillery a few miles upriver. The original distillery was destroyed by fire in 1879 and never rebuilt, so the prominent philanthropist and businessman James Fleming decided to build a new distillery in 1879. The famous whiskey writer Alfred Bernard visited it in 1880 and described it as the perfect model distillery. In 1892, James Fleming sold Aberlour to his trusty friends and whiskey agents, Arthorne and Sons, and they expanded the distillery only to have a fire in 1898 destroy most of the whiskey stock and the buildings. Fortunately, the distillery was insured, and Thorne rebuilt and modernized the new distillery much to what it is today with the help of the prominent architect Charles Doig. In 1920, Aberlour was sold to W. H. Holt and Sons, who owned it until 1942. Significant changes were about to happen when S. Campbell and Sons bought it in 1944. Grain restrictions lifted, and Scotch was back in production. In 1966, the Campbells appointed a new distillery manager, Ian Mitchell, a third-generation employee who was born and raised on the distillery. Under his progressive management, Aberlour won many awards and gained international fame. In 1974, a year after doubling the distillery capacity, the Campbells sold Aberlour to Pernod Ricard, who still own it today. Using the water from Birkenbush Springs to fill a 12-ton mash tun, the 3-hour wash cycles fill 6 70,000-liter washbacks to ferment for 48 hours and produce an 8.5% beer. The two 21,000-liter wash stills produce a 22% low wine spirit that cools through the copper shell and tube condenser, then feeds into the two 15,500-liter spirit stills. The stillman cuts the middle heart, and the heads and the tails go back to be redistilled. Most Aberlour single malts are double cast from first fill American oak barrels, and the harder to find Oloroso sherry butts, as well as some PX sherry butts from the Jerez area of Spain. From the visitor center, you can go down to warehouse number 1, where you can choose a 16-year-old sherry or bourbon cask whiskey, and you can bottle, seal, and label the whiskey yourself. Well, welcome to Noel's World of Whiskey, and we are now wandering to another one of those whiskeys that I just don't know why I haven't reviewed it. And of course the last one was the Glendronach, which opened up the door to the Aberlour, because I was thinking, you know, sherry bombs. I'm looking through the cupboard. Good God, this is one of the first whiskeys that my son turned me on to. It goes way back, so no, I haven't reviewed it. So there we are. We're going to look at Aberlour. And Aberlour is a very well-known, quite a famous distillery. It's actually the number 1 selling whiskey in France for a single malt, so for Scotch, period. And I would say that for me, it's one that I was familiar with in the earlier days when I was drinking single malts. Now, not as far back as, let's say, the Glenfiddich here, because that goes way back to the beginnings. And same with the Macallan here. And the reason I got the Macallan out is this is their actual sherry. I call it their sherry bomb, because it's actually their actual sherry oak there. So I felt let's throw some sherry at us here and let's see what Aberlour is up against, because this was actually one of the earliest sherry bombs. Not the earliest, but one of the earliest. And not far from the Aberlour distillery, I think this is the closest distillery to the Aberlour, is this distillery right here, and that's Glendronach. I will post if I'm wrong, but so Glendronach, another heavy sherry, Billy Walker's, of course, Glendronach, and which is back here, another sherry bomb, and of course we've got Annick, which is from Knockdhu Distillery, good sherry influence there. We know Redbreast, Irish. What the heck? Let's throw in some Irish pot still. That's another sherry bomb. This is the bartender's malt Auchentoshan, and definitely has some. It's such a mix of cask, and definitely has some sherry influence to it. This is Canadian, and this is sherry. In fact, that's what this is a Gaelic term. This was the company that got sued by the Scotch Whisky Association. So Ray Brown, which means sherry oak there. So that's the Canadian version of a sherry bomb. Okay. And so on and so on. Oh, let's not forget Glenfarclas. Another sherry bomb right here. Glenfarclas. There you are, sherry bomb. So we've done our duty here, showing you some sherry bombs. This is a fraction of what we could show you, but that's all I'm going to put around me. I got enough here to display, and you can do some exploring yourself and go look for some sherry bombs. What is a sherry bomb? It's a strong sherry influence, and they're all, some people call something a sherry bomb, somebody else say just sherry influenced or whatever, but I kind of look at it as a heavy sherry influence is what it is. So anyways, we take a look first at nice cask. This is traditional. They have kept this cask. It's, look at that, metal bottom. You know, so another very good cask. So these guys get points for that. And, you know, Abunadh. What does Abunadh mean? The origins. I'll tell you a little story about that. And I've had numerous bottles of this through the years. So this has been a pretty consistent bottle. And you can see the color, natural color, non-chill filtered. From the Aberlour Distillery right in the center of Speyside. 50 distilleries in the Speyside. There's probably, within the distance of this distillery, within bicycle distance, there's probably 25 to 30 distilleries you could cycle to. So great area if you're visiting Scotland. So anyways, there is your bottle. Let's just show you some legs and some color, natural color. And I find I have to keep my hand in front of this if we're going to get some good legs there. And then hopefully I can pull it to the side and maybe you can see the legs. Where did this come from, Abunadh? Well, actually I did a little research on this, and you know, the beautiful thing about this, when I do these reviews, I do a pile of research and I learn more and more stuff. That it's one thing just drinking this stuff, saying, well, I've drank it for years, and you don't know anything about it. So here's what I've learned. Why I didn't learn this stuff earlier. So you know, this came about. The distillery site was getting a rebuilt in 75. They were actually adding a second pair of stills. And well, the workers were kind of working, doing the work and the prep, and they had to obviously get down in underneath the building and all that stuff to put these new stills in, changing things around. And they discovered a time capsule. What is the time capsule? Well, it was a bottle that was 1898. It was wrapped in newspaper. I think newspaper was talked about the fire, and it was wrapped around the bottle. And basically, what do workmen do? You find a bottle like that, you're having lunch. Well, they polished off about 4/5 of the bottle at lunch break. But the remains of the bottle went off to the laboratories. And so they got a 1/5 to work with, which is enough. And that was in Keith Moray. And they analyzed it, and they basically figured, you know, the actual percentages of how much Oloroso was in it. I think there was some American bourbon in it as well, but it was mostly sherry. And yeah, dated 1898, so it already at that stage had aged. So who knows where, you know, when it was matured. So interesting stuff, you know. So that's how this came about, and that's the word origins or. So a quick history on the distillery here. It was started by James Gordon and Peter Weir. That's about all you're going to hear about these two fellows, because basically what happens is they start it, but it tells me here that it was James and John Grant that were the lessees, and they basically stayed with it until 1833. And of course, what they end up doing is they build the Glendronach in Ross, not too far from that distillery. And it really sort of, the history kind of disappears, other than there is a bottling. The first bottling was 1828 that shows actual bottling with the name Aberlour on it. And then there's another one in 1845 that they have. So it's other than that, there isn't a lot to really talk about, other than the fire that destroys that distillery in 1879. And then, of course, that's where we get into James Fleming. And just James Fleming is in itself a name that is. If you lived in Aberlour, or you're in any part of Aberlour, they know about James Fleming. There's a hall named after him. He basically was born and baptized in that area, and he was actually a tenant farmer at Tom Farkless in Glendronach estate. And of course, James grew up basically as a kind of a frail kid. He's a hard-working kid, and he's working on a farm. And the doctors felt that he was too frail to continue into the farming business as he got older. Get yourself a job that you're going to survive a little bit better than you will on a farm, because it just physically he wasn't healthy enough. So he ends up getting involved as an agent in the grain business, and becomes very successful, very smart fellow. And he eventually acquires the lease for Delaware Distillery, and he makes a lot of connections, because he is a grain agent, and he even ends up with a mill, leasing a mill. So and it shows that in 1871 that he moved back to Aberlour, and of course he becomes the bank manager for the new North of Scotland Bank. And through that, his influence is both the money he's making through his grain agency business, as well as being part of a bank. He's in the perfect place, and he sees the whiskey business is really growing fast, and farmers need money for their grain, and they get a lot better money from the distilleries. So in 1879, he secured a few from the Earl of Fife on the land where he built the Aberlour, and he finished it in December 1880. And eventually, he successfully ran the business, made money, and it was such a successful business. He ends up selling it to the two agents that he worked very close with, Robert Thorne and Sons, and they take over it, and of course he passes on. But what is interesting here is James Fleming was a philanthropist. During his time in Aberlour, he helped a lot of the locals. He helped them out financially. After his death, he left money behind to build a hospital to help, because he saw the problems with people that did not have money. They didn't get the health care. And he goes on to Robert Thorne and Sons, and they run the business very successful right up until, and they did do some rebuilding of the distillery, expanding that, and they run it right up into the First World War, which of course now we've got the issue with grain being rationed, etc. So 4 of the sons go off to war. When they return after the war, the uncle, William, has already sold off a lot of the small businesses of the family, and also is bought out the minor shareholders so he now has control of the distillery, and he starts to dismantle it. So basically, Robert Thorne & Sons is no longer. And from there, we get into the Holt group there, and Holt ends up he purchases it. 1920 is when he purchased it, and he ran it right up into 42. But it's really the Clan Campbell, or the people that really elevated Aberlour to its success as it is today. And they purchased it in 1945. So Clan Campbell ends up running it, and they were good people to work for. I mean, they used to do the dram. They would offer the dram in the morning, afternoon, and the evening. It's something that stopped in the 70s, but all the distilleries did it. But the old man would come in there and work with the workers. Whenever he saw somebody with dirty hands and calloused hands, he said, "Those are the hands that make me money." But anyways, he had a fellow that had actually grown up. He was born on the distillery. He grew up. He was third generation on that distillery. His name was Ian Mitchell, and Ian Mitchell is really the brainchild of the modern whiskey, the success of the modern whiskey, because of his incredible knowledge. He was their master distiller and blender. He understood cask management, and he basically brought the whiskey to international fame. And during his time, it did win awards. His name was Ian Puss Mitchell, very well known person, well respected. In the Aberlour area, just as James Fleming was. And then, of course, it moves on to the distillery manager that went to Glenlivet. That's Alan Winchester, and he's now, he's moved on to Glenlivet since. But today, it is Cruikshank is the actual distillery manager. So, and now Abunadh, the whiskey. So let's give it the nose. A very rich, leathery, sweet and leathery. There's just something rich about the smell of Abunadh. And because it's cask strength, it just, you get that intensity of the sherry. Chocolate. Lots of dark fruit. You're talking dates, and you're talking prunes, raisins. Ooh, and a bit of alcohol. I can remember it's cask strength. So, anyways, the palate. Oh man. Well, you can see by the bottle. I compare this as a bench. It's a bench for sherried whiskeys. And pardon me, I'm just it's delicious stuff. So you think of Aberlour. If we were comparing, let's say, a Glendronach, maybe a Glenallachie, Annick or whatever, the Murray from Kilberdine, I look at that. Now that's a cask strength, mind you, and the 12 might be a better, or the 18, but this has been a standard for me. It's the one I like. So, but I use it as the bar. I use it to set the bar. On the palate, what a coating on the mouth. It's just. We talked about Clynelish having a heavy coating. Mortlach went into the 16, heavy coating on your mouth. Glendronach, that coating on your mouth. It has definitely strong sherried influence. The chocolate mixed in with the dried fruit. And it's a dark chocolate. there's when I talked about the leathery nose to it, there's something very deep about this particular the Abunadh, and it's different than just about all the other sherried whiskies. And there's been something criticized, say, oh, it's not where it used to be and whatever. But I've had numerous bottles through the years. I still like it. It's still one you should have if you like sherried. If you like sherried whiskies. If you're not crazy about heavily sherried whiskies, maybe not the Abunadh, because it's like the 105. It's a heavy cask strength sherried whiskey. This might be even deeper in its in its texture, but I get a lot of not just the sherried notes, but I get a lot of, we always talk about Macallan's that chocolate. I get a lot of the chocolate here in an Aberlour. The interesting thing is that these are all really close together, all of these distilleries. So there's always some similarities, and they all have knowledge of one another. It's kind of like there's some secrets out there, but not total secrets. So these masters distillers have moved around too. So, but anyway, this one is the finish. Long, very long, and very slight bitterness, but I don't mind it. It's kind of like that sweet, not so much sour. There's not a lot of sour notes here, but sweet and a very, very slight in the background, and that's the wood. But and then it fades, and the coating on your mouth, right up to my lips, So it's an exceptional finish. I'm getting definitely the prunes and the dates, but also I get a slight bit of stewed pears, stewed prunes. That coating, that's going to be there for a while. Let's add some water. It's at 59 point whatever %. It can take a little bit of water. Still get the leathery, but it's even sweeter yet with water, and I'm getting some perfume notes. Some very exotic perfume, floral. I'm in a Bouchard Gardens is where I am right now. Sweet and floral. Very lighter on the leather. So, with water, the palate. Sweeter, dark, fruits again, but creamier. So adding water, it still keeps it viscous, and it doesn't. This didn't water it down. It actually brought out more stuff here, because I'm getting now. We're talking about the stewed pears, the stewed fruit, lots of stewed fruit now. It has that and depth to it, like there is underneath all that. You see the sherry and the wood, the sherry wood influence, and as it hits you, it goes from sweet, it goes through the different fruits. You're tasting, like I say, you're tasting even raisins at some point here. You taste a bit of the prunes, the stewed. You go right through all the stewed fruit. You're getting little bit of this, a little bit of that, and for me to sit there and fire all the descriptors at you, it's happening fairly fast, eh? So that's what I like about Abunadh. It's kind of a blast of different things that you get, and you get them just long enough to just stay. It's not like it's all homogenized together. You get them in little bits and pieces. It's like a spectrum, you know, of different tastes. And I can write them all down, like some people do. Write them all down, but you can discover them yourself. Believe in me, this is an exceptional. It is an exceptional whiskey. Now, based on the price, it has gone up a little bit through the years. I will list the price there. I'm trying to remember because it's gone up. What are we paying for it today? I mean, there was a time when that was in the 100 plus range. Now it's getting closer. So this is something that I haven't purchased in quite a few years. So I'll have to post what the price is. But I think overall the price is still quite affordable. I like to respectfully give this a decent score. It's been one I've sort of stuck with, and I know there's been some criticism that it's done this, and but then again, I've been drinking this for quite a few years, and I've found that it's more like this, and I also find that, you know, I seem to adjust to the new bottle, and this is as good as the first bottle I drank, as far as I'm concerned. This has kept a consistency, and so it deserves a good mark. It's non-chill filtered. It is natural color. It is right in the center of the space side, and I feel that it is deserved of a 84, 85 mark rating for a Cask Strength. We're going to call it a sherry bomb, maybe, for some of you. Some will say just heavily sherry influenced. If you do not like heavy sherry influenced whiskeys, you will not like that whiskey, because it has got a heavy sherry influence to it. For those that have not experienced Abunadh, you have to, if you like the sherry influence. So that's my Aberlour A'Bunadh review, and I'm going to ask you to drink wisely, drink intelligently, do not drink and drive, and until the next time, so long.